My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and beer.
Years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Say community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
Right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode here. Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. I'm very excited to get going with this episode today. To be honest, it's kind of a twist. I know one of the things that we talk about is, getting dispatchers in the door, helping people through the process. But one thing that we need to acknowledge and talk about as well is reasons why people don't continue on after they have made an attempt to reach into the dispatching world. So I do help and connect with a lot of people who go and they apply, and it doesn't end up working out for many reasons. And one of my guests that I'm bringing on today, Hannah, reached out to me and was like, hey, I used your material. I went and tried it. It didn't end up being a good fit for me. And I want to kind of give that feedback so we can help prevent people from having a bad experience going into the dispatch field. So this is Hannah. She's going to talk about that with me today.
Hello.
Hi, Hannah. Hello. How are you? I'm good. How are you?
We're kind of like talking over each other, but
I know, right? We got this. We're gonna get into step. It's all good. So you reached out to me because you used all my Raspy Dispatcher stuff to kind of help get you into the field, and you only end up staying in the field for about 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So just tell me a little bit about your initial experience of like applying for dispatch and how that looked for you.
Yeah, so I never saw myself ever being in law enforcement. Like, I was just like, I never thought I'd ever do it. Like, it was just like something that was never in my like vision or anything, right? And then I couldn't get a job during the pandemic for some reason. It was really hard. I applied to like 50 places. No one would hire me. And then I saw a job posting to be a dispatcher in a town like a nearby. And I was like, you know what? Like, why not? I was like, I'm not getting any jobs. Let me just try it out. I looked at the job description. I was like, okay, seems pretty common. I can type, I can hear, I can, I can do the basic stuff. And then I did my application. And immediately, because I'm a researcher, I have to know like everything about everything before I do something, whether it's like a makeup product, a hair product, clothing. I have to know just everything about it before I actually buy it, right? Mm-hmm. And so during while I was waiting, it took about, I think like a month to get a letter saying like, hey, you're being picked for the next process. So during that month, I was like doing everything possible, looking up like dispatch things. And I'm like, okay, it's a day in the life of a dispatcher. What is a dispatcher? And I came across your videos and I was like, oh God, I was like, this is perfect. It felt like I hit gold because you really explained everything. And I really mean it when it came to like how you talked about the interview, the Criticall, like the background. It was just like you nailed it. And so when it came and it happened, I wasn't lost. I wasn't like, what's this? What's that? I was really well informed. And I'm really appreciative of your work and what you're doing. And like, it's really helpful. It got me the job, so, but it was about, I applied to about 4 agencies before I finally got one. And then the last one that I got was the one I stayed with for 3 weeks.
Okay. So, I think it's awesome that you were able to find, my channel and was able to use that information that we put out there to kind of help you through the process. I do get a lot of feedback from folks, but, sometimes you just hearing it and just knowing that because I think the point of me putting out all those videos and all that information is to inform, because I think it can be really intimidating, right? Law enforcement, the police, like, ooh, like it can be very like just intimidating in general. And I think with these videos and the information that we're putting out here, just for folks who are considering this line of work, it's just that knowledge brings that anxiety level
For sure.
down.
Yes, for sure.
Mhm.
It gives you like room to breathe in the sense of like you're not so like what am I expect, like you don't know what you're expecting.
Exactly. So you went through the whole process, which is taxing in itself, Criticall, interviews, backgrounds.
Yeah.
Did you have to do a full like psych and all
I
that stuff
did,
as well?
yeah.
Okay.
So the funny thing is that I failed my first polygraph, and
Mhm.
which I was like, I don't. For all the questions, like I mean, I've never smoked, I've never drank in my life, never. I was
Mhm.
just raised up in a religious home, and I just never wanted to. And they
Mhm.
didn't believe me. Like at the end, they were like, when we brought up marijuana, and your heart rate went up, and I was like, okay. I was like, I'm sweating. It's kind of hot in here, like and that was like my hiccup for the first agency. They didn't, accept me because of that. They were like,
Mhm.
they even insinuated like it's just best to be honest, and I was like, girl, I am like. So
It's funny for people who are considering going through the process, and it's true. Like sometimes, like this is why polygraphs aren't admissible in court, right? It's one of those things where if your body reacts a certain way, it's going to trigger the machine.
yeah,
Um, so it's always not necessarily about, yes, we want to be honest, of course, right? But our body can do weird stuff while we're being honest
yeah,
too.
exactly, yeah,
Um, so not to freak anybody out who's going
yeah,
into a polygraph, but you really gotta like just relax and
yeah,
answer the questions and let your body just ease into it, because the job of the polygrapher is to kind of get you to
to
tell
spill,
things,
yeah,
yeah, to spill, even if you already told the truth. Like I remember when I went into my polygraph, I ended up calling my professor after, and I was like, I didn't get the job. Like they didn't believe me. I failed that. And he was like, Mrs. Valenzuela, because he always calls me by my last name.
yeah,
What actually happened? I was like, well, they just kept asking me if I had stolen stuff, and that they said that they hired some other lady who like was stealing things every week, and they're just trying to get you to admit more than you've already admitted to. They're
exactly,
just
yeah,
trying to pull that
to
out of you.
see,
And
yeah,
that's their job.
yeah.
Hmm.
It's like it kind of like if we push your buttons enough, you might say something that will bring it up.
Exactly. So that's why whenever I talk about like polygraph and backgrounds, like after you submit your background packet, you've already bared your soul. You should have already admitted to all the wrongdoings
Yeah,
that you're gonna be required to admit to, because that's what they
yeah,
ask for
yeah,
in the packet. So there should be no surprises going forward when you end up getting to the polygraph stage. It's like, well, I already told you when I was 12 I stole the race car from Toys R Us,
yeah,
like
yeah,
whatever it is, you've already admitted. The process is just about consistency. If
yes,
you already admitted to this little thing over here, that should be the only thing that keeps coming up. There shouldn't be like, oh,
exactly.
well, I forgot to say this on this day. That's what they're trying to pull out of you during these steps of the process.
Yeah, and like it was very like intense because and when I get it's called the PHS, right? The personal history statement. Is that
Hmm.
what it's
Hmm.
called? Okay.
Yep.
Um
Hmm.
it asks us like for your previous home addresses, and I was like, well, I've lived in my house all my life, right? But I went to
Hmm.
college and then I worked at a camp. And so when we were going through it, the investigator was like, so you've lived only at your house? And I was like, yeah, like that's the only place I've ever lived. And he was like, so you didn't go to college and live in dorms? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, and was that your address for a while? And I was like, well, yeah. And then he was like, so you didn't put that there? And I was like, oh God, I didn't realize like how
Hmm.
very detailed, everything had
Hmm.
to be.
Hmm. And typically, like I remember on my first PHS that I did, um, it asked for neighbors
Yes.
information.
Yes.
And then on the top of the paper, it was like, if you don't know your neighbor, knock and introduce yourself.
Yes.
And I just thought that was hilarious, because I could see people going, well, I don't know my neighbors, so I'm going to leave that blank. You know,
Mhm.
I'm not even gonna, I don't know them. I don't want to know them, you know, but like you're going to go do this work. You're going to knock on the door. You're going to introduce yourself and you're going to, cause I had to ask for their phone, email. And I obviously had their address cause they were my
Yeah.
neighbor, but, all that like personal information, I had to be like, my name is Ashley. I'm applying for a dispatcher and you know, like, so, um, in the background process, if you don't have the information, they're expecting you to go find it and figure it out. You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
it is part of the test, air quotes, to see as an applicant, like, how bad do you want this? You know?
Yes. Yeah. And I kind of picked up on that where it was just like, how bad do you really want it? Like, are you willing to go that far of just, hey, go talk to the person 10 steps away from you, you know? Or are you just like, nah, I'll leave it alone, you know, and be lazy about it. And that kind of just shows where your heart is and what you know, what you care about.
Exactly. So you got through the whole process, and you know, it's day one of at your department. Kind of walk through like that whole experience you had.
Yeah. I laugh because you know how people always respond with yeah, so, and I'm like, I'm trying not to do that, but I was supposed to work graveyard, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., you know, night shift. And then my first day, they were like, oh, actually, your trainer's not going to be in, so you're just going to have to come throughout the day. And I was like, okay. So I was like, all right, I'll just come through the day. I walked in and they were like, okay, go to this office. We're going to give you keys, you know, to the department and show you around. And I was like, all right, this is cool. There was about 4 of the people who were hired with me. So we were kind of all training, but we all had different shifts. But I saw one girl and I was like, oh, I feel good because I'm not the only like newbie here at the time. But it was like, I go into the comm center and it was like all dark, all black. And I was like, oh, complete different from, you know, we were inside the building and then now it's just like dark and it's all screens. And they introduced me. There was about like 4 people at the time. And then they gave me this huge binder and they were like, you need to read everything in it. And I was like, okay, like I guess I'll read. So for the 12 hours that I was there, I read, and I read like the penal codes, you know, the alphabet, the military time, all the like employee handbook, and then like the intro to CAD systems, you know, like it was just like a full binder full of like, this is what you're going to be doing and read about. And that was kind of boring. I'm not going to lie. I was just like, wow, this is my first day, but I was like, this was fun in the sense of like, it's a new thing. Right. So then, the next day I went, it was also the day again. And then my trainer came on the 3rd and 4th days. So I don't know if most agencies are like that, but it would be like 3 days on, 4 days off. And so she came. And once she came, it was able to be more interactive. They were like, okay, we're gonna get you a headset and then you can listen in on her calls and then you kind of just like take notes. What does she say? What does she do? And I was like, okay, this is more interactive. This is more fun, but I still have to read lots and lots of papers. I kid you not, I probably read over like 1,000 papers. And I was like, this is not how I learn. I'm like, I cannot read by learning. This is not my learning style. Like, I need to see it firsthand, visually. You need to teach me and show me. So that was one thing that kind of made it hard, was just how much I had to read. And I was like, but the first week was transitioning from being a day person to like night was entirely like, I think I even commented on one of your videos, what are your tips? And then I think you made a video after. And I was like, this is great, because I did the curtains, you know, I had the melatonin, even the mask, and I still couldn't sleep. So that week I probably ran on like 5 hours of sleep. It was like 1 hour here on this day, 2 hours on this day, and then 3 hours on this day, because my body couldn't adjust. And I had a headache, and then my eating schedule was like, so my health was just like, we're not working. We're not doing this for you. And my brain was just fried from all that reading. But that was my first week there.
Yeah, you know, and like there's one thing for the folks who are thinking about getting into this is that there is a certain level, especially when you are first starting, that you have to be flexible, right? You have to be flexible because, especially in the smaller departments, it's possible that trainers call out. The staffing is a little rough. They might have had it planned for you to, be shadowing and listening all day, and then someone called out, and then, they have to fill a seat. So it is very possible when you're getting into this line of work that training and that first couple shifts can be a little rocky, just because of the nature of staffing in our centers. So we definitely need to leave space for that, know that going into it, right? But as trainers and folks who are bringing new people in, we also have to understand that I don't want to read for 12 hours.
Yes.
12 hours, like that's tough to ask somebody to do. I remember when I was a pre-hire, so they had me answering and doing like repossessions, tows, and alarm calls for the first couple weeks that I was at my job. And I remember being told like not to look at my phone or not to, as I'm waiting for someone to put a call on hold for me. And but it's 12 hours of just sitting there. And they're like, oh, but you could be reading and learning. And it's like, yeah, but no one reads for 12 hours. So like we need to find different ways to help people stay busy, but understand like it's 12 hours.
And there comes a time too where you just your attention span, like scientifically speaking, like you don't have an attention span for 12 hours. Like your brain is not at its full potential, full max for that long of a time. So it's like, hey, like, let's switch it up. Let's do something else. And that's something I did for myself. I was like, am I allowed to make Quizlets? And they were like, sure. So I made a Quizlet and I was playing it as a game. Like, okay, I'm going to match this number with this code or like this, And that really was like getting me through the night where I'm like, I'm tired of looking at this binder. I'm going to go on Quizlet. I'm going to play games and learn at the same time.
Yeah, I love Quizlet. If you are someone who is in training or about to go through training, or if you are at a center and you help with creating your training, creating Quizlet for your department is super helpful. My academy did it. My department did it for our academy. So part of our like entry packet, our big binder included a Quizlet login. So they made a department Quizlet.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to go create our own. They were already created for our department with our type codes, all of our things that we were going to need to learn and be quizzed on.
Yeah.
For our specific department, they gave us a login and we were able to practice.
That's awesome.
So Quizlet is just basically, for those who don't know what it is, it's online flashcards. And like Hannah said, that if you're practicing penal codes, it'll be like, what's 211? And then there's like a spaceship coming and you're trying to type it in before the spaceship hits the meteor, so it's just fun, especially for adults, who were, out of the learning realm, even if we're in school, our school's different than it was back in the day. So just finding new and different ways to help trainees be cued in for 12 hours is super helpful. And I think Quizlet is definitely one of those good resources that are out there and free. Really.
Yes. Yes.
I'm always down for the free.
Exactly. It's like you can't find a lot of good free things, but when you do, you better use them.
Yeah, 1,000%. So what do you think agencies and trainers should consider to help reduce turnover after your experience?
For me, I guess because what I appreciated with my trainers that she asked me, what are your learning styles? And I was like, I learn visually, I learn audibly, but through like in person. So if you tell me just watch a video, I'd be like, okay, I watched the video. I'm not like a learner. Like I can't learn through just reading either. I need to like role play So if they're like, okay, let's role play a call then, and I'm like, okay, then I learn because I get through that habit, right? So her and I were able to connect on like, these are my learning styles, and I really, really appreciated that. Like her kind of adjusting how she was going to train to like what I needed, and then me kind of like compromising, kind of just meeting in the middle. And I feel like that's something that agencies should put into practice, is like getting to know the new hires' learning styles. Where do they effectively learn best, so that we don't waste time. Okay, just read, and then they're getting nothing done. They're not getting anything retained. And then this is kind of a little far-fetched. I don't know if a lot of people can do it, but like simulators, like being able to, because I love gaming. So I even had this game. It was called 1112, and it's a 911 simulator game. And you take calls, you write them in, and then you dispatch for fire, medical, and law enforcement. So you had all these three. Then if you would like miss a call, they'd knock you on points, and it was really like interactive, and that helped me. Like, of course, when I did to do the real job, it's nothing like the game, because it's in real life. But it was able to help me get into the habit of like, okay, now type in the code right after you do this, and then do this, and then do this. Kind of like giving you not so much a checklist, but it's just like a guideline, So I feel like simulators would help really well. When you think about people who go to flight school, they don't just go straight to the plane. They go through a little simulator first, and then they learn that way. And that's how I felt like just being a good dispatcher requires lots and lots of practice. And I know in this line of work, because it's so short staff, you can't just take your time like that, right? Like you can't just do 8 months of just training and no taking real phone calls. And that's what makes it hard. It's like, it's that gamble, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think in a perfect world, in every dispatch center, we would have a full-fledged academy, and then we would, slow it into the calls. And then, I think in a perfect world, we would all have that. But like you said, the reality is with staffing and things of that nature, we're more likely to be thrown into the pool than, get to step in with floaties on. So,
yes.
But I do think there is room, even in our short-staffed environments, for us to create situations for entry levels to be successful. Especially because I think in smaller agencies, maybe more often than not, I've heard like them wanting laterals to come in rather than entry levels, just because how much time needs to be put into an entry level for them to be successful, and them to really learn how to do this job well. I was really lucky with, I think, my experiences. We had an academy, a 5-week academy, and in class. So we're like in there, we're role playing, we're doing Quizlet, we're doing Jeopardy,
That's awesome.
we're hitting all like the different like ways of learning, with a group of folks who are also going through the same experience as me at the same time, which was very helpful, very important. And then we did a week we called it a hot week, and we would go on the floor for a week and take calls with a trainer and just get our feet wet and start answering calls and listening to calls. And then we'd have one more week back in academy before we hit the floor and did full-fledged training. And then I remember talking to a friend of mine who worked at the neighboring agency, and they were like, "Oh no, you get your headset first day, you're on the floor, you're answering phones." Like, what? Like, you don't. So I mean, there's realities for both of those situations, right? One is going to benefit more folks. Some are going to be like, I just want to get in there and answer these calls. But I think and correct me if I'm wrong, is I think the most important part is that we feel supported in whatever situation we're in. Because it's all going to be challenging, right? Like no matter what the setup is. But if we're not feeling supported by our trainers or our coworkers, if we're not creating good environments for people to learn and thrive and make mistakes and do it again and do it right the next time, I think that's when the turnover sets in.
For sure, because I know there was this one moment where I got a call and I had no idea. Like, I was just like, I don't know what code this is. And then, like, so I kind of was like, ma'am, can you please hold? And luckily I was doing business line, I wasn't doing 911s yet. But I looked at my trainer and I was like, I don't know this one. And she was like, it was in your book. You said you read it. And I was just like, okay, like, let me just, ma'am. And then looking through my book, like, where did I read it at? Like, where is it, And it was just that, because I get the idea of, like, tough love, like, but it's like, these are people's lives, tough love happens, I feel like, in other things, not in this, where, like, what I do can affect the call type, and then the officers are like, oh, this is a high priority call, and then I accidentally just messed it up because it wasn't right. So that's why I'm like, that idea of, like, being supported, I think, was just, like, the number one thing that was just like, I don't feel like I could ask for help, and I don't feel like I can ask for forgiveness in the sense of, like, I'm sorry, like, can you help me out? I was just like, you did wrong, like, learn it yourself. And it's like, okay.
And that doesn't ever feel good, right? I mean, if, like, I'm already, in the initial, my initial employment, it's like, I'm trying to keep this job, right? Like, bare minimum, like, I like what I'm doing, I'm enjoying this, but at the end of the day, like, my paycheck got to come. And if I don't pass training, then my paycheck is no longer a thing and I got to go find another job. So, like, not only is the job itself stressful to learn, there are a lot of other real life aspects that we as people and trainers need to acknowledge. It's like, it's not just that if they don't make it, and that's another number, we don't have staffing. It's like, well, now they're out of a job and now they got to go figure out what's next. And, like, we want people to be successful in this line of work. But we also want to create safe situations and financial situations where we're making good money and we're enjoying what we're doing. And, because we've all had jobs that we've hated and show up just to get a paycheck. And I think that we have the ability to create good environments in our workplaces and in our centers so people enjoy coming to work.
Yeah, and that was one thing too, is that I, like, when I don't, like you said, we don't want to bash or do anything, but it's just like the people, the way they talked and spoke about certain things, I was like, I know you've been here for a couple of years and maybe you're a little cold to things because that's the way you cope, but it's like, I don't want to end up like that just to cope with this job, right? Like, and they say, tell me who you, like, hang around with and I'll tell you who you are, like, because the people you're around with can have an effect on you, like, for some reason, if your partner is very bitter and angry that day and snaps at you, you're going to be like, your natural reaction would be like, girl, what? Like, let me snap back, instead of taking the, like, okay, what's going on,
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't want to be with, but
it's so true.
People who are like that.
Yeah, and it's such, and I think, I went to a dispatch conference, and one of the speakers, and I'm gonna very poorly restate their title, but it was basically like, why do dispatchers eat their young? And it was basically speaking on this kind of culture that some dispatch centers have, where it's that, sink or swim, you can't do the job, then, you gotta go. And it's like, these environments that we have, we do acknowledge exist in our centers. And when new folks are coming in and they're not tied into it in the sense that they're so deep with how much money they're making, or they've already put X amount of years into this career. Like, you were there 3 weeks and you're like, I'm cool off this environment. Like,
Mhm.
the job's hard. The vibe you guys got going here doesn't make me feel good. So why should I continue?
Yeah.
You know, and those are the things that we have control over changing in our
Yes.
centers. You know, and someone like you, who I think if you would have had a better experience, maybe still would have been in dispatch,
For sure.
is it? And that's a loss, right, for us as a career. Like we
Yeah.
could have avoided that.
Yeah. And like I definitely have said that because people will ask me like when they ask me like, well, what jobs have you had? I'm like, well, I don't even put it on my resume because I wasn't even there long enough. But I go,
Mhm.
I really liked it. Like the idea of like you can be that bridge between like someone getting help and like their life changing. Like it's such a fulfilling, rewarding, like it brings purpose in a sense of like I know my job helps people. And I mean, of course,
Mhm.
not every day is sunshine and rainbows, and you're gonna get those bad calls and it's not gonna come out good, but it's like you're in a position that can change someone's life.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's one of those things that it's like what greater like what greater joy do you have than being able to help other people? But it was just like I don't even think I could effectively help people in this environment. Like I like if I was, because then the next week, so after the third week, they're like, on your fourth week, we're going to start putting you in 911s. And I was like, if I was a caller and I knew I was behind the phone, I'd be like, give me someone else, please, please. Give me someone who knows what she's doing. And that's how I viewed it. Of like, would I want, like, if I was on the outside, would I want me to help me? And I was like, no, because I'm not equipped. I'm not prepared
Mhm.
enough to do it.
Mhm. And I mean, I think there's definitely, again, that it all goes back to the experience as a whole, right? Because at a certain point, like we got to answer that first 911 call,
Yes.
and you're going to fumble through it, and you're going to, but your trainer's there the whole time to make sure liability wise that we're
Yes.
covered. They're listening, they're
Yeah.
making sure we don't miss anything. They're telling you to drop it and go, and we're rolling. But there is a level of trust that has to be built between you and your trainer as well. And if I'm having a poor experience with my trainer, and it's not to say that I'm going to get along with every trainer, every coworker, every employee. That's not it. It's the fact that as CTOs, as leadership in our centers, it's our responsibility to create that engagement with our trainees, in my opinion.
Yes.
It's not my trainees' responsibility to facilitate trust. It's mine,
Yes.
as being the one training or bringing them, because they're coming into my center, they're coming into my environment, and I need to make them feel welcome, supported, and they're gonna mess up. You will mess up, but when you do, I'm gonna have your back, and then we can debrief after.
Yes.
Like, I don't know the type code. Like, okay, like what do you think it is? Especially on a non-emergency line, we can put them on hold and wrap through that a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, like my partner, she worked in education, and she would always say, like, the one thing that I always found with these kids who are having any issues with like family and stuff like that is that they just want someone to show up. Like, they just want someone to show up. And even if I'm the worst basketball player on the team, I want to be able to look up and see my people, whoever
Yeah.
they are,
Yeah.
they're supporting me. And I think that's kind of the mentality we have to have in our centers, is like, we just need people to show up for us.
Yeah.
And be that supporting system on the good and the bad days.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I know I can look to my trainer, and that how like when people, if you're like in a crowded room and you don't know anybody, but then you see someone who's familiar, that like ease that comes, that's what like you kind of want that relationship to be like. It's like, this trainer is like what puts you at ease. Like, hey, I'm gonna push you till I'm gonna push you, we're gonna learn. But at the same time, it's that safe space of like, you can trust me, I'm here only to help you. Like, it's literally my job. It's like just to help you get better at this job. But unfortunately, like, it's like I say it too, like, not all teachers should be teachers. There's teachers that it's like, I don't think you were meant for this job, sorry. And then there's trainers like, I don't think you were meant for this job either.
And another reality is that they might not be. Staffing might put them in
Yes,
put them in this
yes.
position where they have
Uh-huh.
to train, and they would much rather not train,
Yes,
but
yes.
as the trainer, you gotta kind of come out of yourself, even if that's the position you're in
Yeah.
your center. Um, that you gotta be the bigger person in that
Mm-hmm.
sense, right? You gotta create that environment for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you go ahead?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No.
No,
You have a
you
thought,
go.
please.
You go
No,
ahead.
you.
Please, please.
I was gonna say, if you had a better training experience, do you think you would have stayed in dispatch?
Yes, I would have. I
Mhm.
think I enjoyed it. I really did. For that little time that I was there, I would look forward to go to work. Like, even though my head
Mhm.
hurt, I didn't get no sleep. I was just like, I'm gonna go to work today. And and
Mhm.
after not working for a year because I couldn't get a job, it was like something to look forward to. And
Mhm.
I was very like interested in just like I learned so much in those 3 weeks about law enforcement and just like the background and like even going back to the idea of like I didn't realize dispatching was a job. Like I knew it was there, but I didn't know like
Mhm.
really. And just seeing to see like behind the scenes and like I joked with the people there. I was like, people always want to have robots take like jobs. Like they should take dispatch jobs because then you don't have no feelings. Like you're not gonna cry or you're not, like it's just a robot saying, "Okay, well, help is on the way. Where are you at?"
Yeah.
Um, because it's like they're very emotionally taxing. This
Mhm.
job and mentally, but it's I don't know. Like I really enjoyed it. I really did, and I do see myself probably in the future applying for it again if my life plans don't work out.
Mhm.
But I do. I also one thing too was just like I felt like I was like I'm 21. And I was like I don't want this liability. Now that I think about it, like
Mm.
I'm like I am pretty young. Like and everything I did became law record, right? They're like, you have to cover your tracks, you put your name, if you look this up, and I'm like, okay. Um, but it was just like, dang, this is big liability that I didn't really recognize when applying. How
Mm.
the responsibility you have.
Yeah, the amount of information that we have access to, and the level of I just did another episode, and the individual I did the interview with said, you're basically eavesdropping on a
Yes.
very personal moment and experience this person is having.
Yeah.
And, they, as dispatchers, they don't know you. We're not the ones they remember,
Mm-hmm.
and yet you have all of this knowledge. Like I talked to a friend of mine who I went to school in Iowa, and they small town dispatch, and they're like, yeah, I go to the grocery store and I see all the people I talk to, like I know all
Yep.
their drama.
Yeah.
And in these bigger places, we kind of have a little more, no one knows us. But in these
Mm-hmm.
smaller towns, and if they know you work for the police department, you know their business, and there is a certain level of liability. You got to keep things to yourself, and knowledge
Yes.
that you have about people who call into us, that um yeah, you have to hold that, and
Yeah.
you have to guard it, protect it, and give it what it's due.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember I applied to a town that was local, like about a couple minutes away, very. And so they were like, people here? And I was like, yeah, I do. And they're like, so what if like someone called you? What are you going to do? And I was like, obviously keep it to myself, like, what am I going to do? Go like have cheese man? Like, guys, guess what I heard on the phone today? Like, no.
Yeah.
So when I applied and I got the job at a town that I've never really been to, I was like, oh, perfect. I don't have to worry about nobody calling.
Yeah.
None of that.
Oh man. So what sorts of things would have been helpful for you during your training process?
Hmm. I feel like being, and maybe it's my learning style again, it's like just very thorough. Like
Mm.
I can't just be told something once, and there we learned it needs to be done multiple times and at the same intensity every time. Don't like sugarcoat or like beat around the bush one time and then tell me this time. It's like we're gonna go over this until you get it. And that's how it felt for me. Like, just certain things that I could not stick in my brain. And I'm like, can we just sit down and like go over this and over this and over this till I get it? So that was like something, I guess, personal for me. But going back to, I genuinely feel like simulators would really help. I know not every agency probably has the resources to buy, but honestly, it's just like getting an extra monitor and a computer and then making fake calls. You know, it can be very simple, but something to show effort that, hey, we want to invest in you back, right? This isn't just you putting in all your time. It's us. Hey, how can we help you? And let's see, I'm on there. I had like a list, but I kind of forgot them. I should have read them.
Well, I do think that role playing is huge. We, at my agency, the one that I learned and trained at initially, we did a lot of role playing. We listened to a lot of like different calls. Our trainers would look at old calls for service and like act them out, like read the notes and just kind of wing it, what it was. So definitely creating. I know after I left, the new academy person created pursuit tapes. So it was the radio traffic of officers putting out pursuits, and then we had we were lucky we had a offline computer system, so you can go in and it's a fake environment that isn't live, and you can work within the CAD system and drop calls and do all that, listening to the pursuit and like pretending the voice what you would say and type how you would type it and all that stuff. See, so creating
that's exactly it. Like, it's a simulator. Like, you know, we're simulating this environment of like you're in the comm center, you're on the floor, and you just got a call. What do you do? What do you write? And it's like, okay, let me do it. But it's not real, right? Like, none of it. It's just for your own learning experience, and then for your trainer to be like, okay, you missed this. I think you should have asked this a little more. You know, I feel like that's helpful for anyone to learn. And I even when the day that I quit, I told, because she asked me the same thing, and I was like, think about like sports, for example. They make these players. We'll say football, right? You practice for months and weeks, preseason or whatever, and then game time comes. So you know the plays, you know how to execute it. They don't just tell you a play and then the next day they're like, run it. And it's like, where does the ball go? Who do I throw it to? Okay, where does my defense go? Like, it, you know, they make sure that it's really well, like, it kind of like it's pressed into their minds. So that when they go to game, you know, it's less likely to make mistakes. And that's what I mentioned to the supervisor. I was like, I just feel like there should have been a lot more learning time instead of just like, okay, now you're going to take calls this week. And then they were like, we're going to put you on radio. And I was like, I don't even understand them. This radio is so hard to understand. What are they saying?
Yeah. And I think this is another great thing for people who are interviewing. I think a lot of times during the interview process, and I'm guilty of it too, is like you're trying to get the job, right? So you're trying to kind of say the things that the right things, what they want to hear, this, and that. But for this type of job, you need to be really intentional with asking the questions too, to make sure it's a good fit. Like, how do you guys learn? How do you guys teach? Do you have an academy? Do you role play? Do you, going into these conversations, asking these questions so you can see if it's a good fit, especially if you're 4 departments in all these processes and you're trying to figure out which one's the best fit for you. If department A has an academy and department B doesn't, you might end up going with A because that's going to be a better style for you.
Yes.
If you're like, I'd rather jump in the deep end and go, then you might go with department B. So I think owning this part of the process as well, asking the right questions and not just asking filler questions just so you could be like, I asked them a question at the end of my interview, because this job is tough. Like, it's not just like any old job. So really making sure that it's all a good fit for both of us, me, the department, you, the potential applicant, I think goes a long way.
I definitely wish I could go back in time and ask those questions. Like, those are, see, the things that I learned was like after being there, that I was like, oh, I should have asked, how do they train? How do they do this? How do they do that? And those are questions, I don't know if I just didn't know to ask. Like, you know, should I have asked that? I kind of just thought it was kind of common sense. Like, hey, we're going to invest in you, but you know, you never know how different departments do different things. But I would, like, that's my advice, is like, you need to ask the questions, like you said, that like, is this going to be a good fit for you? Because it's part of your job during, I feel like during the interview process, is to interview them back. Like, hey, what, like, can we work together? Would we be a good team? So that it's not just all about them, you know, telling you stuff or whatever. But
yeah, no, I think like, and when you hit me up, like, oh, you know, I was 3 weeks in, like, I want to chat. I was like, what are we just being like, you know, man, dispatch is whack, or like, you know, like what was the vibe? So like, that's why I reached out to you. I was like, well, what's the, what are we trying to get at here? And you're just like, you know, I really enjoyed it. I really like the stuff you're putting out there. I just didn't have a great experience in my training process. And that's why I left early. And I think that's a relevant topic, which I told you, I was like, oh, I totally agree. Like, we need to have these conversations with folks who go through the whole taxing process of getting on board with an agency and then have a poor experience in training and then go, I'm good. You know, like, that's something we need to talk about as well, because we can change it. You know, that's something we can look at and make changes.
And I felt like so guilty too, because I was like, man, this took like 4 or 5 months to get the job, and now I'm quitting. I was like, they spent their resources on me, you know, like, you know, doing all this stuff to get me in, and then here I am, like, okay, bye, see you later. I can't do this no more, you know. But it was just like, I'm like, okay, because old me would have been like, just tough it out, who cares? But I guess new me, you know, we're learning, we're growing, was like, no, like, you've already expressed concerns. And like, because 1 week, the second week, I was just like, hey, I don't think we're kind of like on the same page. I feel like you feel this way towards me, or you kind of say things in a really weird way, like, can we meet in the middle? Agreed. And then the next week it happened again. So I was like, okay, this seems to not, it's not getting through, right? So I was like, I'm not going to waste my time for what, you know. But I generally, like you said, they're controllable situations if you just kind of like, as a trainer.
No, so true, so true. But you know, you left dispatch and you're out there doing your thing. You got some good stuff going on right now, right?
Yeah, so I'm currently an engineering major, so I want to work on airplanes. So I'm doing mechanical engineering. My college doesn't have aerospace engineering, but they're kind of the same, really. There's like 5 classes that are different. And then I'm going to be working as a tutor for reading and math at a local school district. And then I'm also going to start modeling with an agency. We have contract signing coming up, so I'm really excited for that.
Congratulations. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, so those are like my life plans. If they don't work out, you know, I don't mind going back to dispatch. Like, it's not,
yeah, dispatch is always hiring. So, but hopefully you don't have to go back to dispatch, and you know, and you stick on the engineering track. I think that's awesome. I also think, and again, unfortunately it didn't work out, but I think dispatching is a great way to make good money and still go to school. Like, I think that's kind of like a cool thing that we overlook a little bit in dispatching, is you can work the nights, you can work like these knock shifts and like weird hours where you can still kind of go to school and chase your dreams and make good money doing it. So,
and I know, like, we're kind of like coming to an end, but like, I don't want to ramble, but I know that in the first 3 weeks I was doing my accounting class, because I was a business major prior, and I could not do it. I was like, because the trainer was like, you can't do any homework for your first year on probation. And I was like, well, I'm supposed to graduate this year. So I'm like, I need somewhere to do it, you know? And one of my classes, it was, for each assignment, took 3 hours long, nothing more, nothing less. And I go, I I dropped out of school for the summer because that's when I was working at the center. And then I was like, well, this would have been great. Like, I could have done homework if they would have let me, but they were like, no homework for your first year. And I was like, well, there goes that. But now I'm back in school, and I changed my major because engineering has always been my passion, and my school is really small, and they finally added it. And it was just like, God was just like, you need to do it. Like, it's something you've always wanted to do. So I was like, okay, let's do it. So I have 2 years left now.
Awesome. Everything happens for a reason, and you're in a place where you're gonna be chasing your dreams. And I do appreciate you, even though dispatch didn't work out, that you still were affected by it enough to want to jump on here with me and like just give your feedback to the dispatch community about like how we can improve, because I think we need these conversations. So thank you so much for being willing to do that.
Of course. Thank you for having me. And I really dispatch is still in my heart. Like, I want to be an advocate for it in some way, shape, or form. And I was talking to the agency. I was like, do you guys do anything where you reach out to the schools and do like little presentations? And they were like, no. And I was like, well, we should do that. Like, teach kids how to call 911, because a lot of times a lot of callers can be children. And then this is like, hey, these are the steps of like, okay, if let's say your mommy fell, it's like, well, mommy fell, I saw her, this is the time, this is our address, kind of giving them a rundown of like, I mean, it's not a fun thing to have to call 911, but to give education and to give them the proper knowledge that if they do it, and maybe they won't do it when they're kids, but they'll do it when they're older. And they'll remember like that one time where I was at the school assembly and we had a cop and a dispatcher come, just, I felt like that would be something that would be really good. And I still want to do it, even though I'm not in law enforcement. So I'm kind of working out, how do I do this?
Hey, and that's what we need, right? We need more people talking about dispatch, talking about 911 services, and how to create a good relationship between the caller and the dispatcher, because, the caller's only as good as I am, and I'm only as good as the caller is, right?
Yes,
so,
yes.
Yeah. Again, I really appreciate it, Hannah. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll be right back with you, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, everybody. That was another episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch. I definitely think it is a conversation that we need to continue to have in regards to the dispatch community. We are responsible for creating good environments for our entry levels, our laterals, our trainees, so we can continue to reduce our turnover in our centers, and because the world needs more dispatchers. Until next time, everybody, stay raspy. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube at The Raspy Dispatcher, follow us on Instagram, and check out Let's Talk Dispatch anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'll see you next time, and stay raspy.